The courtroom was supposed to be silent, but the moment she stepped inside, everything shifted. A 10-year-old black girl in faded jeans, a loose white shirt, and shoes held together with worn tape stood at the center aisle like she had walked into the wrong world. But her eyes, dark, steady, unblinking, said she was exactly where she needed to be. People stared, confused, annoyed, curious, but she didn't move. She had only one purpose: save her father. On the judge's bench sat a man whose presence once commanded entire rooms. Judge Alden Pierce, white, powerful, respected, and feared, had built a reputation for being iron-willed and unshakable. But now he sat in a sleek wheelchair, spine fused, legs unmoving for 3 long years. His face carried the exhaustion of a man pretending strength he no longer possessed. Beneath the polished suit and the stern voice was a pain no one else could see. Except her. When she looked up at him, she didn't see the imposing judge. She saw a man shaking ever so slightly, his breathing uneven. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the struggle he hid behind authority. And then she spoke, soft, fragile, yet sharp enough to slice through the courtroom noise. "Your Honor, your lower back is hurting right now. Right side. It started less than 20 minutes ago." A ripple moved across the room. Gasps, whispers, laughter. But the judge froze. Because she was right. Exactly right. The pain that had stabbed him minutes earlier wasn't visible to anyone, not even the attorneys standing closest to him. But this child had seen it instantly. And, she added, voice trembling but determined, "I can stop that pain. I can make your legs feel something again. You just have to free my dad." The gallery erupted, half disbelief, half outrage. A child offering to heal a paralyzed judge? An impossible bargain from a girl too poor to even afford new shoes? Reporters' cameras zoomed in. Phones were raised. The bailiff took a step forward, ready to remove her. But she didn't run, didn't flinch, didn't back down. Judge Pierce stared at the girl who dared negotiate with him. She didn't blink. She didn't apologize. She didn't correct herself. She simply waited, as if she had more authority than anyone else in the room. Her father, Marcus Hale, sat behind her in handcuffs, head lowered, knowing his daughter was risking everything. He whispered her name. "Lena, please stop." But she shook her head. She couldn't. Not today. Not when the judge held the power to steal decades of her father's life. Pierce's pain spiked again, sharp and burning. His jaw tightened. The moment stretched. He didn't believe in miracles, especially not those promised by children. But he felt trapped between agony and curiosity. 12 minutes until paramedics arrived. 12 minutes of pain he could barely manage. "You have 3 minutes," he said at last, voice strained. "If nothing happens, you will be escorted out." A gasp swept the room. Lena felt her heart hammering, but she stepped closer. Barefoot now, just like her grandmother had taught her, she approached the judge with hands trembling, breath shaking, courage barely holding by a thread. The cameras zoomed in. The world seemed to lean forward. She placed her small hands on the judge's back. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the judge inhaled sharply, not from pain, but from recognition. Her touch wasn't random. It was precise. She pressed into a point that burned like fire beneath his ribs, and the crowd watched the tension loosen from his shoulders. "You have a nerve trapped," she whispered, "and a muscle spasm that's pulling everything wrong. I can fix it." The judge's eyes widened. His breath steadied. A warmth spread down his spine. Something new, something frightening, something hopeful. Cameras rolled. The gallery held its breath. Because a paralyzed judge had just felt something in a place he wasn't supposed to feel anything. Lena opened her eyes, filled with fear and determination. "Your Honor, please. Let me help. I only need these minutes. You only need to believe me." She didn't know it yet, but this moment would change everything. A courtroom divided. A judge fighting pride and pain. A daughter fighting for the only family she had left. And a world watching a miracle they weren't prepared to understand. Lena's hands hovered for a moment before she pressed deeper into the judge's back, her fingertips tracing invisible lines only she could understand. The courtroom was frozen, suspended between disbelief and the fragile hope forming in the judge's silent breaths. No one dared interrupt. Even the bailiff, halfway through a command, slowly lowered her hand as the air shifted into something solemn. Judge Pierce wasn't a man easily shaken, but the heat rushing down his spine was undeniable. It wasn't warmth like a blanket or medication. This felt alive, like something waking beneath layers of numbness. His fingers tightened around the wheelchair arms. The pain that had been a 9 was now fading, slowly, impossibly, to a 6. People had tried everything on him for 3 years. Surgeries, injections, acupuncture, therapy. Nothing reached the root of his pain. Yet this child's small hands had stirred something buried deep. Lena kept her focus, though fear trembled inside her. Her grandmother always said, "Feel with your hands, think with your heart, and listen with your bones." For years, Lena watched her grandmother heal people no doctor believed in. Neighbors with old fractures, farmers with twisted spines, mothers with aching joints. It was wisdom passed through generations, forgotten by the world, but alive in Lena's palms. Her voice quiet but steady, she whispered, "I know you don't trust me, but trust your own body, your honor." It remembers what the doctors forgot. The judge blinked, startled. How could a 10-year-old speak like that? Cameras zoomed closer. Viewers across the live stream watched in silence. Lena didn't see any of it. She was lost in instinct, following threads of tension under the judge's skin, knots of pain telling her exactly where to press. Marcus Hale, her father, watched with his heart pounding against his ribs. He had always known Lena was special. Ever since she was 6, she could sense pain in people before they said a word. She could place her small hand on someone's shoulder, and they'd sigh in relief. But he never imagined she'd use that gift here, in a courtroom that wanted to bury him, under the gaze of a judge who wanted to punish him, in front of strangers who doubted her existence. He whispered her name again. "Lena. Baby, please be careful." But his voice shook with more hope than fear. Lena didn't look back. She couldn't. Not when she felt the judge's muscles shifting beneath her fingers. Something was wrong, deep wrong. Tension wrapped around his spine like wire. Scar tissue pulling vertebrae sideways. A nerve pinched so tightly it felt like a trapped thread. She swallowed hard. "Your Honor, did you fall from something?" "Hard." Pierce's eyes widened. "Yes. 3 years ago. Rock climbing." "How did you?" "You have 2 old fractures," she murmured, tracing a line down his back. "One healed wrong. One healed too tight. Your right leg is shorter now. That's why your chair leans." The courtroom erupted again, this time with pure shock. The attorneys, journalists, spectators, all watching a child diagnose what medical specialists had missed. Judge Pierce's jaw clenched, not from pain, but from the realization that she was right. He had felt the lean. He had complained about it. No doctor ever explained why. "How do you know this?" he whispered. "My grandmother taught me. My mother too." Her voice softened at the word mother. The judge saw something flicker in her eyes. Loss, grief, strength built from breaking. He remembered reading the file earlier. Her mother had died young. He didn't know how, but the ache in Lena's voice suggested a story deeper than any he expected. "Your mother," he said gently, "was she?" "A healer," Lena replied, eyes bright with emotion she tried to hide. "Just like Grandma. They helped people when nobody else would. Even when they had nothing. Even when they were tired. Even when they were hurting." Her breath shook. "She always said healing is a responsibility, not a gift. And I have it now." The judge felt a strange tightness in his chest. Not pain, but guilt. He'd spent years brushing off people who didn't have titles or degrees, believing knowledge only counted if printed on paper. But this child stood before him, carrying a legacy of healing in her bare hands. The crowd watched, phones recording every second. Comments flooded the live stream. "Is this real? My grandma did the same thing in Louisiana. This kid is gifted. The judge is moving." But Lena couldn't hear the world outside. She was inside her own focus, navigating pain with instinct honed by love, loss, and lineage. She pressed deeper. The judge inhaled sharply, pain, sharp and bright. But then it melted, replaced by a sensation he hadn't felt in years. A tingling, a faint twitch, something waking. His eyes widened. His breath caught. "I felt something," he whispered. The courtroom reacted like an ocean hit by thunder. Gasps, screams, cameras flashing. Marcus dropped his head into his hands and sobbed silently. Lena's hands didn't stop. She knew this was only the beginning. "Your nerve isn't broken," she whispered. "Just sleeping. I can help remind it." Her fingertips traced a path along his lower spine, pressing, lifting, circling, movements from generations of knowledge. She didn't fully understand the science, but she understood the feeling. Body spoke. She listened. Judge Pierce swallowed hard. How long can you keep doing this? Until you feel hope again, she whispered. His lips parted. He didn't know whether to fear her, trust her, or thank her. But something inside him, something he thought was dead, felt alive. And then, with the entire courtroom watching, his right toe twitched. A barely there movement. A flicker of muscle. But it was real. People screamed. Some cried. Some covered their mouths. One reporter nearly dropped her camera. The judge's voice cracked, disbelief trembling through him. My toe. It moved. Lena stepped back for the first time, her chest rising and falling, sweat dampening her forehead. She looked at him, not as a judge, not as a powerful man, but as a patient who needed her. It's only the start, she said softly. If you let me keep going, if you let me finish, I can help you walk again. Pierce stared at her, every belief he had ever held cracking open like thin glass. Outside, the world watched. Inside, a miracle was beginning. And this was only part 2. For a moment after his toe moved, no one seemed to remember how to breathe. It was as if the entire courtroom inhaled at once and never let the air go. The sound that finally broke the silence wasn't the judge, or the lawyers, or the reporters. It was a single choked sob from the front row where a woman in a faded floral dress covered her mouth with both hands. She had come to see a sentencing. Instead, she was watching a miracle. Judge Alden Pierce stared at his foot like it belonged to someone else. For 3 years, his legs had been props. There, but useless, dead weight attached to a life he was trying to salvage. Every doctor, every specialist, every expensive second opinion had told him the same thing. Permanent damage, no functional recovery expected, learn to adapt. He had adapted, modified his house, changed his car, adjusted his schedule, built a public image around strength from a seated position. But that tiny movement from his toe had just shattered 3 years of certainty in less than a second. Lena saw the fear in his eyes before she saw the hope. That was how it always went. People were scared of hope. It hurt too much when it broke. Her hands tingled, the way they always did when something inside a body responded to her touch. Her heart thudded so hard she thought everyone could hear it. She wiped her palms on her jeans and stepped back just far enough to look up into his face without leaning on the bench. I told you, she whispered, barely loud enough for the microphone to catch. Your body remembers. He swallowed, throat tight, voice rough. How many times have you done this? Lena blinked, caught off guard. The healing? Yes. This. His fingers trembled as he pointed slightly downward, waking things up that other people gave up on. She thought of the old man whose cane she'd sent back to the closet, the neighbor who could finally raise her arm, the mechanic who stopped waking up screaming from his back spasms, the woman who'd walked into their trailer, crying, and left laughing. She also remembered the ones who hadn't changed, the times when she'd tried and nothing shifted, their pain too deep or too tangled for her to unknot. I don't count, Your Honor, she said slowly. It's not like keeping score. Some people get better. Some people just hurt less. Some people don't change at all. But I try for all of them. The answer came out more honest than impressive. That mattered to Pierce. He was used to people selling hope like a product, guaranteed results, miracle treatments, instant cures. Lena didn't sound like that. She sounded like a child who had seen too much suffering to promise anything she couldn't deliver. He exhaled hard, the weight of 3 years pressing through that single breath. You said you could help me walk. Her gaze flicked to his legs, then to the cameras, then back to his face. She knew everyone was listening, twisting her words into headlines, waiting for her to say something they could call a lie if things went wrong. I said I could help your body remember, she corrected softly. That's different from promising you'll run or climb again. I don't control that part. I just do what I was taught. In the gallery, Marcus swallowed a bitter laugh that never made it out of his mouth. He sat in his orange jumpsuit, wrists cuffed loosely now, his entire future hanging by a thread made of a 10-year-old's hands. The irony chewed at him. For years, he'd told Lena to keep her gift quiet. People don't respect what they don't understand, he'd warned her. They'll call it fake. Or worse. He wanted her safe, invisible, untouched by the harshness of a world that already judged her skin, her neighborhood, her father's salary. But here she was, standing in the center of that world's harshest room, doing exactly what he'd tried to protect her from. The prosecutor, a sharp-faced woman with perfect hair and a voice trained for outrage, finally snapped out of her shock. "Your Honor, this is highly inappropriate," she said, pushing back her chair so hard it scraped the floor. "This child is interfering with judicial proceedings. She cannot bargain medical claims for leniency. This is manipulation, not medicine." A murmur of agreement rose from one side of the room, mostly from those who had come demanding punishment, not mercy. A few nodded along, whispering words Lena had heard her whole life: crazy, desperate, delusional. On the other side, someone called out, "Let her finish." Another voice echoed, "He moved his toe, didn't he?" The judge lifted a hand, and the murmurs died. Power was a habit with him, and even when shaken to his core, he still knew how to wield it. His gaze dropped to Lena again, softer now, less granite, more human. "Why your father?" he asked suddenly. "Out of everyone you could have stood up for, why risk everything for him like this?" Lena blinked, startled by the question, as if he'd asked why she needed air. "Because he's all I have," she said simply. "And because he told the truth and nobody listened." Pierce flinched internally. Truth and listening were supposed to be his world. He was the man who measured words and weighed evidence, who prided himself on being fair. But he knew, deep down, that his courtroom didn't always reward truth. It rewarded performance, preparation, power. The side with more resources usually told the version of the story that stuck. He glanced at Marcus. The file was clear: low income, overworked, blamed for a chain of mistakes inside a system that refused to hold the higher-paid professionals accountable. An easy scapegoat. A clean narrative. A lesson for the public that someone had to pay. Pierce had seen it before. It wasn't technically corruption. It was inertia. Laziness dressed as justice. His back throbbed again, reminding him that not all pain was visible on paper. "Tell me about your mother," he said, almost without meaning to. The words surprised him as much as they did the room. Lena's face changed. Her chin quivered, but she steadied it. "She was a nurse," she said quietly, "at the small hospital on the other side of town. People like us didn't usually get doctors who listened, so she tried to be the one who did. She used to come home with her feet hurting and her heart full. She would write about her patients, about what medicine did right and what it forgot." "Forgot," he echoed. "Forgot that not everything can be measured on a chart," Lena said. "Forgot that sometimes people in places like our trailer park had more knowledge than anyone wanted to admit." She used what she learned from grandma and what she learned from school. She said the two together were stronger than either alone. "And what happened to her?" he asked, though he already suspected. Lena's eyes shone, but no tears fell yet. She seemed to refuse them, like she didn't have time. "She got sick," Lena answered. "Very sick. The kind of sick that needs more tests and more time and more money than we had. She knew what was happening to her before anyone wrote it on a chart. She begged for certain scans, certain treatments. They kept saying, 'Later, later, later.' Later never came in time." For the first time since the hearing began, Pierce couldn't look at her. His gaze dropped to his own hands, clean and manicured and lined with years of signatures that had changed lives, for better and for worse. He thought about all the times budgets mattered more than people, the times policy outweighed humanity. He'd always convinced himself that wasn't his problem. He just applied the law. The law was neutral. Only now, a 10-year-old was quietly dismantling that lie in front of a live audience. "So she taught you," he murmured. "Until she couldn't." Lena nodded, voice thinning. "She made me promise I'd keep using what she and Grandma knew." She said, "Lena, they may not believe you at first, but bodies don't care about bias. If you can help, you help." She swallowed. "She also told me to stay away from powerful people who only see us as poor." That last line hung between them like a challenge. "Yet here you are," he said. "Because you have something I need," Lena replied, lifting her chin. "My dad's freedom. And I have something you need. A chance to feel your life again." The honesty was so stark, so unadorned, that it cut through every rehearsed speech and polished argument in the room. Pierce felt it like a scalpel. No flattery. No manipulation. Just a trade, offered from the most vulnerable person in the room to the most powerful. He could have ordered her removed. He could have claimed decorum, procedure, legal precedent. But sitting there, spine still aching yet undeniably changed, toe still tingling with impossible sensation, he realized something terrifying. The system he represented had failed her family long before she stepped into his courtroom. The least he could do was listen now. His voice, when he spoke again, was quieter than anyone had ever heard it in that chamber. "Lena," he said, using her name for the first time, "if I let you keep going, and if I agree to look again at your father's case, I need something from you in return." Her heart jerked. "Anything," she whispered. "I need the truth," he said. "All of it. Your father's, the hospital's, the one hiding between the lines of every report. No miracles. No dramatics. Just what really happened. Because if I'm going to challenge my own ruling, I have to be absolutely sure that justice isn't just a word we carve into this building, but something we actually do." For the first time since she'd walked in, Lena allowed herself a tiny, tired smile. "That's all I've been asking, Your Honor," she said. "For someone to finally want the truth." And as he looked at her, the poor black girl in worn clothes and bare feet, standing unshaken in the center of his courtroom, Judge Alden Pierce felt something more radical than pain relief or nerve activity. He felt the first real crack in the wall he'd built between his position and his conscience. The wall would not survive the day. The judge's chamber felt colder than the courtroom, even though it was the same building, the same air drifting through the vents. Maybe it was because this room didn't have an audience. No press, no gallery, no noise. Only truth, raw, uncomfortable, unavoidable. Judge Alden Pierce rolled himself toward the long table at the center while Lena, Marcus, and the bailiff stood silently behind him. The prosecutor hovered near the door, arms crossed, trying to mask the fear creeping up her spine. She had lost control of the narrative. Worse, she could feel the judge slipping from her influence. A single child had undone years of courtroom hierarchy, political pressure, and quiet expectations about who gets punished and who gets protected. Alden placed his hands flat on the table, staring at the stack of case files he'd ordered from the clerk. Thick folders, thick lies, thick silence. He had signed off on all of it once without blinking. Now, he couldn't even touch them without feeling Lena's hands ghost across his back, reminding him of possibilities he had long buried. "Bring me the diagnostic reports," he said. Patricia, the bailiff, handed him the first folder. Lena stood close, small enough to barely reach his shoulder, quiet enough to let the papers speak for themselves. Inside the folder lay the X-ray images of the patient, Mr. Harlan Price, whose death had triggered the entire case. Alden had seen these before, or thought he had. Right now, they felt like strangers staring back at him in grayscale shadows. Marcus swallowed hard, unable to speak. His fingers twitched toward the table, longing to show the judge what he had tried to show everyone else. For months, for years, but no one had listened. Lena stepped forward before her father found the courage. "Your Honor," she said softly, "you should start with page 7. Alden paused. "Why page 7? "Because the truth is hiding there," she replied. Her certainty pierced him. He turned to page 7. It was a radiology note signed by the hospital's chief diagnostician, Dr. Newton. Formal, sterile, cold. A decision written in words that ignored consequences. Suspected cardiac enlargement. Follow-up recommended. No immediate abnormalities noted in lung structure. Alden felt his gut twist. That line, "no immediate abnormalities," had shaped everything that came after. It was the anchor the prosecutor had used to build her argument. It was the line Marcus had begged them to look past. "You reported something else," Alden said quietly, not looking up. Marcus nodded once. "Yes, Your Honor." "Say it." Marcus breathed in deeply. His voice cracked with the weight of too many years spent trying to be heard. "I saw a soft mass forming near the right lung. I told Dr. Newton. He told me I was mistaken. He said a technician shouldn't overstep. He said extra testing would make the hospital look bad." The prosecutor stiffened. "Your Honor, this testimony was already reviewed during the trial." "Reviewed," Alden repeated, his voice dull, but not believed. "That's because." "That's enough." His voice turned steel, the kind that ended careers if challenged. The room dropped back into silence. Alden stared at Marcus, really stared at him. Like he was seeing the man for the first time instead of as a file number. Marcus's eyes were raw, not defiant, not angry, just tired. Tired in the way only an honest man becomes when nobody believes him. Lena stepped closer to her father, placing her hand over his. Her tiny fingers covered only a small part of his calloused skin, but the gesture made him steady his breathing. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her presence was the anchor his life had been missing. "Bring me the original imaging," Alden said. Patricia tapped on the tablet and pulled up the scan on the large digital screen. Lena walked toward it slowly, bare feet against carpet, calm as someone walking toward fate. She lifted her hand and pointed at the corner of the screen. "There," she whispered. Alden squinted. A shadow. Faint. Like a smudge. Like a mistake. But not a rib. Not a fracture. Not a random artifact. "It's round," Lena said. "Not straight like bone. Not spread like muscle. Mama taught me shapes matter." The judge's breath trembled. He pressed 2 fingers against his temple. The prosecutor took a step forward. "Your Honor, she is not a medical professional." "But she is right," Alden said. The words fell into the room like a dropped stone, breaking every rule and every expectation. Lena kept tracing the faint shape with her finger. "Mama said doctors forget that small things can become big things. That's why you have to listen to the people who see the world differently." Alden's throat closed. Memory flashed, his own physician dismissing his pain for months before discovering the damaged vertebrae. If they had listened earlier, maybe he wouldn't have ended up in this chair. Alden blinked hard. "Bring up the last scan. The one taken before the patient died." Patricia's finger slid across the screen. The final scan appeared. The room froze. What had once been faint was now undeniable. A large tumor pressing against the lung wall. Marcus inhaled shakily. That's what I tried to warn them about. I begged Dr. Newton to run more tests. He told me if I questioned him again, he'd file a complaint to have me reassigned." Lena squeezed her father's hand. For the first time, the tremor in his voice broke her heart. The prosecutor stepped backward, paling. "Your Honor, there must be a mistake." "There is," Alden said. "And it wasn't his." He turned to Marcus. "Mr. Hale, why didn't you request a second opinion?" Marcus let out a bitter laugh. "Your Honor, I was a technician making $19 an hour. Dr. Newton made $200. If I questioned him, I'd lose my job. If I stayed silent, I'd lose my conscience. Either way, I lost." Alden felt the burn of shame crawl up his spine. He had sentenced countless people using evidence like this. Evidence built on the confidence of higher-ranking professionals, not the truth whispered by the ones beneath them. He turned to the prosecutor. "Why wasn't this imaging reviewed during trial?" She swallowed, throat tight. "The hospital claimed it was confidential internal documentation." "Confidential?" Alden's voice thundered. "This could have proven innocence." "Your Honor," the board insisted. "Oh, I know what boards insist," he snapped. "Especially when protecting money over truth." Lena watched the judge with wide eyes. She could feel something shifting inside him, not just physically, but morally. His spine wasn't the only thing waking up. Alden exhaled shakily. "Bring me the hospital's internal correspondence." Patricia hesitated. "Your Honor, those are usually restricted." "Do it," he whispered. Within minutes, emails appeared on screen, cold, damning words. Mentions of liability. Avoiding lawsuits. Protecting reputations. Contain the narrative. Prevent unnecessary attention. Avoid technician overreach. And one line that made Alden Pierce's hands tremble. "If Hale pushes again, we will terminate." The prosecutor's face drained of color. Alden leaned back slowly. His body hurt. His back, his ribs, his conscience. Pain in every layer. Lena saw it and placed her hand gently on his shoulder, like she had before. "Breathe, Your Honor," she whispered. "You're holding your pain wrong." Alden let out a shaky breath. The room blurred for a moment, the weight of guilt and responsibility pressing against him harder than any physical injury. He looked at Marcus. "I failed you," he said quietly. "My courtroom failed you. The system failed you." Marcus's eyes filled, but he nodded, a gesture of forgiveness, or maybe just resignation. Alden turned to Lena. Her presence grounded him, a strange anchor in a storm he'd created. "You changed more than my back today," he murmured. She smiled faintly. "Sometimes people break in places others can't see." Alden swallowed hard. "Mr. Hale," he said, voice steadying, "I am reopening your case. Effective immediately, sentencing is suspended. You will be released today, on recognizance while we conduct a full, independent review." The room erupted in gasps. Marcus's knees buckled. Lena grabbed his arm, and Judge Alden Pierce closed his eyes, knowing he had just declared war on the very system that once protected him. By the time Marcus Hale walked out of the courthouse doors, the sky had turned the color of a healing bruise, soft purple, fading gold. Clouds streaked like someone had dragged their fingers across the horizon. He squinted against the light, one hand over his brow, the other firmly gripping Lena's fingers. For a man who had spent months staring at concrete walls and metal bars, the open air felt unreal, too wide, too loud, too bright to be trusted. Lena watched him step onto the stone stairs like a baby learning to walk again. She stayed close, ready to catch him, even though she barely reached his elbow. Every few seconds she glanced back, as if expecting someone to shout, "Mistake. Take him back," but no one did. The guards had already turned away. The doors closed quietly behind them. "You're really out," she whispered, as if saying it too loudly might break the spell. Marcus laughed, a raw sound that turned into something like a sob halfway through. "Looks like," he said. "Didn't think I'd feel the sun this fast." "It's not fast," Lena replied. "It's late." He looked down at her, startled by the truth in her tiny voice, then smiled weakly. "You sound like your mother." She swallowed. "I hope so." At the bottom of the steps, a crowd had gathered. Neighbors, skeptical onlookers, reporters with microphones, and strangers who had only met them through screens. Phones were raised. Red recording lights glowed like watching eyes. Someone whispered, "That's the girl," and the murmur spread like wind through leaves. Lena squeezed her father's hand tighter. Judge Alden Pierce watched from the top of the stairs through a side window. He wasn't ready to face the cameras yet. Not standing. Not even sitting. Not while his body shook with every attempt to move what had lain dormant for years, and his mind shook even more from the truth he'd uncovered. Behind him, his physical therapist, a woman named Gloria, adjusted the braces around his knees. She'd always treated him kindly, but today there was something else in her eyes, curiosity edged with awe. "So this is the miracle kid," Gloria said quietly, glancing toward the window. He nodded, jaw tight. "She's the one who made my toe move." Gloria raised an eyebrow. 3 years of hospital teams and equipment, and it takes a 10-year-old to wake things up again. Makes the rest of us look bad. "It's not about looking bad," he muttered. She tilted her head. "Isn't it?" He didn't answer. He was too busy concentrating, not on pain, but on possibility. "Again?" she asked. He nodded. Gloria placed her hands on his forearms. He gripped the parallel bars they'd installed in his office earlier that afternoon, at his request, not the hospital's. His arms trembled as he shifted weight forward. Leg muscles flickered under his skin, small contractions, invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for them. For 3 years they had refused every command. Now they responded like half-forgotten words returning in a second language. "Breathe," Gloria instructed. "Like she told you. In for 4, out for 6. He did. In, out, in, out. The rhythm anchored him. He pressed down, arms burning, legs buzzing. His knees locked, hips protesting. And then, slowly, like a curtain lifting, he rose. Not all the way. Not yet. But enough that his weight shifted off the chair, enough that his spine straightened, enough that the floor felt less like a prison and more like an invitation. Gloria's eyes widened. "Well, I'll be." He held the partial stand for 3 seconds before collapsing back into the chair, chest heaving. Sweat dampened his collar, but there was a wild light in his eyes. "She said this was just the beginning," he whispered. Gloria smiled. "Then maybe you should listen to her." Down on the courthouse steps, a reporter shoved a microphone toward Lena. "Lena, how did you do it?" the woman asked breathlessly. "How did you heal the judge?" Lena blinked, thrown by the word heal. "I didn't heal him," she said slowly. "I reminded his body how to listen. But your hands. My hands just do what Grandma and Mama taught them." Her gaze sharpened. "You wouldn't say a stethoscope healed someone. It just helps you hear." Marcus looked at his daughter with a mix of pride and worry. Fame was a hungry thing. He'd seen what it did to people on screens. It ate privacy first, then peace, then safety. He wanted none of that for her. But there was no going back now. The moment Judge Pierce's toe had twitched on camera, their lives had shifted onto a track they hadn't chosen. "Is it true you struck a deal?" another reporter asked. "Your father's freedom in exchange for the judge's recovery?" Lena flinched. Marcus stepped forward, shoulders squaring, voice firmer than it had been all day. "My daughter doesn't bargain with human beings like their products," he said. She didn't force him to say yes. He was in pain. She offered help. He accepted. What he did next reopening my case. That was his conscience, not her condition. The words landed harder than either of them expected. Somewhere inside, Alden heard them too. Conscience, condition, choice. For years, his decisions had been shaped by precedent and pressure. Today, for the first time in too long, they were shaped by something else, responsibility. By evening, the video had spread far past the courthouse lawn. Clips of Lena placing her hands on the judge's back played on news channels with dramatic captions. Miracle or madness? Child healer challenges justice system. Talk shows argued about ethics, medicine, and faith. Some called her a prodigy. Others called her dangerous. A few accused her of faking everything for attention. Lena didn't watch most of it. Their old trailer's TV flickered more than it worked, and Ruth, her grandmother, kept the sound low, muttering, "People talk when they don't understand. Let 'em." Instead, Lena sat at the small kitchen table, tracing circles on the wood grain with her fingertip, replaying every second in her mind. "What if he changes his mind?" she asked. Ruth looked up from the pot she was stirring. "Men in power don't like admitting they were wrong," she said. "But they like the feeling of being right even more. You gave him a chance to do the second one the right way. Hard to walk away from that, even for a judge in a chair." Lena frowned. "But he's not walking yet." Ruth's eyes softened. "He's trying. That's more walking than some people do, even with 2 good legs." Marcus sat across from his daughter, elbows on the table, eyes still red but clearer than they'd been in months. "What you did today," he shook his head, overwhelmed. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to thank me," she said. "You're my dad. This is what we do. We fight for each other." He swallowed hard. "I should have protected you from all this." "You did," she answered. "You told the truth when it cost you everything. Mama used to say truth is the first kind of protection, not the last." Ruth sniffed, pretending to wipe a spot on the counter that had already been cleaned twice. "That woman," she muttered. "Even gone. She keeps talking through all of you." Marcus smiled faintly. "Good. Means we're doing something right." The next morning, an unmarked car pulled up outside the trailer park. For a second, Lena's heart lurched, fear flashing images of uniforms and cuffs and gray walls. But when the door opened, it was Gloria who stepped out, holding a folded walker. Behind her, Judge Alden Pierce maneuvered his wheelchair onto the ramp they'd recently installed. His face was pale from effort, but his eyes were determined. Ruth folded her arms. "You brought the courthouse to my door," she said, half amused, half wary. Alden inclined his head. "I came as a patient today, not a judge." Lena's breath caught. There was no bench between them now. No robe. No elevated platform. Just a man in a chair and a girl in bare feet meeting on the same cracked concrete. "You could have gone to any clinic," Ruth said. "I did," Alden replied quietly. "For 3 years. They gave me protocols. You gave me proof." His gaze slid to Lena. If you're willing, I'd like to keep working with you. With your grandmother, too. Under supervision. Proper documentation. I want whatever happens to be real, not rumor." Ruth studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "We don't perform tricks," she said. "We help. If you respect that, we got no quarrel." He exhaled, tension easing from his shoulders. "I respect it," he said. "And I intend to make sure the rest of the city learns to respect it, too." Lena stepped forward, heart racing, palms already warming the way they always did when someone hurt near her. "You ready to listen to your body again, Your Honor?" she asked softly. He smiled for the first time that day. Not the tight professional smile he wore for cameras. A real one. "I think," he said, "it's about time I did." And as she helped him position himself near the walker, as Ruth watched with eyes that had seen decades of ignored wisdom, as Marcus leaned in the doorway memorizing every second of this life, he almost lost. The world kept watching from its screens and headlines. But in that small trailer park yard, far from the marble and glass of the courthouse, healing stopped being a spectacle. It became a partnership. 6 weeks after the courthouse exploded across every screen in the state, the building looked the same from the outside. Tall columns, stone steps, carved words about justice and law. But inside, things had shifted. Some changes are loud. Some changes slip in quietly and rearrange everything. This was a bit of both. The hearing room was smaller than a courtroom, but packed tighter. Camera crews, reporters, hospital representatives in stiff suits, community advocates from neighborhoods like Lena's, and a panel of officials from the medical board sat shoulder to shoulder. At the front, a long table faced them like a witness stand turned sideways. That was where Marcus Hale sat, this time in a plain shirt and slacks, not an orange jumpsuit. No cuffs. His hands rested free on the table, fingers interlaced to keep them from shaking. Beside him sat Ruth and Lena. Ruth's hands were folded over a worn notebook, the kind she used to keep names and notes on people she'd helped over the years. Lena's hands rested on her knees, palms open, as if ready to catch whatever came next. On the other side of the room, representatives from the hospital sat rigid, their expressions carefully arranged into a blend of concern and distance. One of them, a man with silver hair and an expensive watch, cleared his throat every few minutes like he was trying to swallow his discomfort. Judge Alden Pierce wasn't at the front of the room. He sat in the first row of the audience, dressed not in his robe, but in a simple dark suit. His wheelchair was gone. In its place, a cane leaned against the chair beside him. His legs were shaky, his gait still uneven, but when he had walked in under his own power, the cameras had caught every slow, stubborn step. The chair of the board tapped the microphone. "We are here today to formally review the case of the late Mr. Harlan Price and the wrongful charges brought against technician Marcus Hale," she began. "New evidence and internal communications have revealed that." She went through the facts, line by line. The ignored scans, the internal warnings, the threats made toward Marcus if he continued to insist on additional testing, the decision to use him as a shield for public outrage. The courtroom had heard some of it. But here, in this room, the story was fully stripped. No narrative, no spin, just the bare bones of a terrible choice. Finally, she turned to Marcus. "Mr. Hale, would you like to make a statement?" He nodded slowly, throat tight. "I don't want revenge," he said. "I wanted the truth on record. For Harlan, for his family, for mine. I tried to stop what happened to him. I failed. But the worst part was being told that my voice never mattered, that my eyes saw wrong, because my pay grade was low. I don't want that happening to another tech, or nurse, or janitor, or anyone." His voice broke. He swallowed hard and continued. "You can't fix what happened to Harlan, or what happened to my family. But you can make sure nobody else gets silenced just because their badge is a different color, or their name is on the bottom wrong, or their skin looks like mine." The room stayed quiet. Some of the suits shifted, uncomfortable. Some of the board members looked, really looked, at him for the first time. The chair cleared her throat. "Mr. Hale, on behalf of this board in this state, we acknowledge that your warnings should have been taken seriously. We acknowledge that systemic bias and institutional pressure contributed to a preventable death and to your wrongful prosecution. We are issuing a formal public apology and full exoneration. Your record will be cleared. Additionally, we will recommend new protocols requiring all clinical concerns from staff, regardless of rank, to be documented and reviewed." Lena exhaled a breath she'd been holding for months. Ruth squeezed Marcus's shoulder. He closed his eyes, letting the words soak into places that had stayed braced for impact long after the blows stopped coming. The chair wasn't done. "We are also establishing the Hale Price Initiative," she continued. "A program to protect and amplify the voices of frontline medical workers when they raise safety concerns. Mr. Hale, if you're willing, we'd like you to serve as an advisor." He stared at her, stunned. "Me?" "Yes," she said. "You." He looked at Lena. She grinned through tears. "Mama would have liked that," she whispered. Later, outside the building, the press waited with a forest of microphones. But the moment belonged to someone else first. Alden walked toward them slowly, each step deliberate. He still used the cane, but he no longer clung to it. The cameras whirred. People parted to make space. Lena watched him approach with a strange mixture of pride and worry, like she was seeing one of her patients step onto a high place without a railing. He stopped in front of her, eyes level with hers now that he was standing. "You kept your promise," he said. "You did too," she replied. He smiled, the lines around his mouth softer than they used to be. "I thought justice was a thing that came from this building," he said, glancing back at the courthouse. "Turns out, sometimes it walks in barefoot from a trailer park and tells you your body and your conscience are both asleep." She laughed, then tried to hide it. "You woke them up," she said. "We woke them up," he corrected. A reporter stepped closer. "Judge Pierce, do you believe Lena's healing is medical, spiritual, or something else?" He looked straight into the camera. I believe it's human, he said. It's what happens when knowledge from a community is no longer dismissed just because it doesn't come with a framed certificate. It's what happens when the people the system ignores refuse to stay quiet. Another microphone thrust forward. Lena, what do you want to be when you grow up? Lena glanced at Ruth, then at Marcus, then at the judge whose legs were learning hope again. She thought of her mother's journal, full of notes about combining worlds instead of forcing them apart. I want to be the person people go to when everyone else has given up on them, she said. Whatever job title that ends up being. That night, back at the trailer, a letter waited in the mailbox. The envelope was thick, the kind that usually meant bills or bad news. Marcus opened it slowly while Lena fidgeted with the corner of the table. He scanned the first lines, then stopped. His hand trembled. What is it? She asked. He handed her the letter, his voice gone. It was from the state university. A pre-acceptance program. A promise. A scholarship in her name. Full tuition for any health-related field, plus a stipend. Funded partly by a new state grant for integrating community-based healing practices into mainstream care. At the bottom, in a neat, careful signature, was a name she recognized, Alden Pierce. Ruth leaned over her shoulder and squinted. Well, look at that, she murmured. They finally figured out your hands weren't just trouble. Lena's eyes blurred as she read a short handwritten note at the end. Lena, your mother saw something in you before the rest of us did. It took a courtroom, a scandal, and a miracle for me to see it too. Use this however you choose. Whether you stand in a clinic, a hospital, a courtroom, or a small room with bare floors, it won't be the walls that heal people. It will be you. Alden. Her throat closed. She held the paper to her chest. For the first time since her mother died, the future didn't feel like a distant road she wasn't allowed to walk on. It felt open. Messy. Hard. But open. Weeks turned into months. The video of the day she made the judge's toe move kept circling the internet, igniting arguments and think pieces and late-night jokes. But for the people at the center of it, life became smaller and quieter in the best possible way. Marcus went back to work, not at the same hospital, but at one where his new boss introduced him to the staff as the man whose voice changed state policy. Ruth held community workshops with nurses and students who wanted to learn what her hands knew. She made them bring notebooks. If you're going to steal from me, she said, at least write it down. And Alden, every Tuesday and Thursday morning, before court, his car pulled into the trailer park. Sometimes he walked in with one cane, sometimes with two. Sometimes on days when his legs were stubborn, he used the chair. But he always arrived, always tried, always sat in Ruth's kitchen drinking tea while Lena worked along his spine, listening with her hands. He still sentenced people when the law required it. But he listened differently now. He asked more questions. He checked what was hiding on page 7 instead of stopping at page 1. He watched for the ways power tilted a story before it reached him. Some days he got it wrong. On those days, he went home and wrote it down, a reminder to do better. You won't see most of that in a viral clip. Screens like the loud parts, the miracles, the confrontations, the moment the judge stood up. But the real story isn't just what happened in that courtroom. It's what happened after. A man walked. Another man was freed. A hospital was held accountable. A little girl from a forgotten part of town was finally treated like what she'd always been, a healer, a witness, a bridge. And maybe the most important thing, people in rooms that had never mentioned trailer parks or grandmother's hands started asking new questions. About who gets believed. About what counts as knowledge. About how often we laugh at the very people who might be able to save us. So if you're watching this, maybe you're like Lena, someone everyone underestimates. Or maybe you're like Alden, someone who thought justice and truth lived in official buildings until a child reminded you they live in people. Either way, remember this. Sometimes the loudest miracle isn't when a paralyzed man stands up. It's when a whole system sits down long enough to listen to the girl nobody took seriously.